everyone says they want to be an entrepreneur. Okay. How bad do you want to shamefully empty your kid's college fund to make payroll? How bad do you want to go to your wife and say, we're almost out? That's the entrepreneur. That without those failures, without those epic failures, without those moments in time when you're saying to yourself, the money is gone, the opportunity is lost, what do I do now? Those are those true moments where you realize you're being planted for something greater. And it's your decision if you end up to, get up and drive on, create a new plan and execute. Don't focus so much on the outcome. Like, seriously, man, like, stop worrying about, what you're going to do in 5 years. Focus on the now. Focus on this quarter. We always propose monthly, quarterly, annually, shut down, plan, execute. And I feel like sometimes we're so out in front of ourselves for what we want to accomplish. So much of this, Scott, as you know, man, so much of the stuff that we do is based on relationships.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Construction MF'ers podcast. I am Scott Peper, founder and CEO of Mobilization Funding, and today I have a great guest with me, a great friend, an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, operator, ex-military, father, great Christian, just an overall awesome dude. And I'm excited to share his story with you guys and take the lessons that I've learned from him and share them with all of you. Todd Schweitzer. Welcome, dude.
Hey, man. Good to be here.
There's a lot of people that are watching this right now that for sure are wondering how the hell I got you in that seat talking to me. But that's going to be a whole separate podcast one day. We'll save that. Okay. But so, look, our audience, as we talked about, are great operators of businesses, leaders, sales folks. They're in the construction world. They're in the grind world. The world that you and I have talked about for years, we grew up in. Most folks everyone's had it hard, but a lot of folks in this world have had the bumps and bruises. You have your fair share of them. And one of the things I love most about you is always been so honest in sharing those. And I've been the beneficiary for the last 10, 11 years. You and I have talked about those things, even things that have their footprint right here in Mobilization Funding. No one knows you, but they would know you if they heard the story. They'd see it in place. And so what I really want to focus on today is a little bit about your background so people know where you're coming from.
Sure.
Touch on that quick, but I want to dive into some of the tactical stuff that you can share. So
all right.
Give everybody just a little quick surface view of who Todd is and what you've done.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is great. I love what you've done here. And I think from an overview, my whole career started in the military. I received a 4-year scholarship to go into an ROTC program. Upon finishing that, I basically was put into and stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I spent 6 to 7 glorious years, and then got out and had a job for about 10 months, and I really didn't like it. It was awful. I was probably awful at it. And then started to create my own businesses.
But that job was, which company were you with?
I was with KPMG.
Yeah, KPMG. It wasn't just a job. You were with a great company on paper, corporate America.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, after being an Army officer, I thought that was the right thing to do, to kind of go out into corporate America and try to learn it. I think that my style probably didn't match up with KPMG. I think that I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always had that spirit. And then after some falling, and we'll get into that too, if you want to, I was able to successfully found and develop and sell 3 businesses over the years. It sounds great in a snippet, Scott, but as you and I both know, right? This is not easy, and I don't care who you are, what you are. If you made the decision that I'm not going to take a job anymore and I'm going to create my own business, it's all hard. It all comes with challenges. It all comes with long hours. And one of the things that I struggled with early in my business is something that you do here. I wish you were around. You and I have talked about it multiple times. everyone says they want to be an entrepreneur. Okay. How bad do you want to shamefully empty your kid's college fund to make payroll? How bad do you want to go to your wife and say, we're almost out? That's the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And that's the story that no one wants to tell at the bar.
No, that doesn't end up in the bio.
No, that doesn't end up in the bio. I wish I could.
Yeah, the bio is Todd Schweitzer is a seasoned entrepreneur and executive with over 25 years of experience leading successful companies in both the private and public sectors. Began in the Army, sold 3 companies, including VTI, Arma Global, and Arba Aviation, each which he guided to significant growth and success acquisition by industry giants as Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics. That's awesome. Now, what people don't understand is you get your freaking face kicked in.
Oh, man. Yeah, you are not lying, boy.
To get that, you have to be very normal and have to fail a shit ton to get someone to write that paragraph. And that's what I love about doing this podcast, and I love about sharing with our clients and our customers is that half the time I feel like the most rewarded just saying, hey, man, just so you know, that's okay, man. You're probably on the right track. I've been that. Matter of fact, I did worse. I had worse things happen this week.
Yeah.
But no one, like you said, no one talks about that. And I think because of social media and because of social media in general, whether it's entrepreneurship or just people's Facebook page, no one's talking about the times that are bad necessarily. They're more focused on the good. And I think the bad times are what really help you accomplish stuff. And so you've always shared those with me, and it's always made me feel normal especially when I've been getting my face kicked in. Right. And I've shared some of those stories with everyone that we talk to on a regular basis in our business.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, hey, listen. I think everybody always wants to talk about the big success, the big sale, the big whatever. First of all, Scott, you know how much I love sitting down with business owners. I love it. Like it's a huge passion of mine. That because I know and understand there is a sort of relationship that's instantly created between two people when they know what it's like to finally take that leap. Like I was just this last week I was talking with a guy and he was he's like I'm trying my best. I'm get home. I'm trying to hang out with the kids, coach the soccer team, and somehow keep a relationship and hold it together with my wife. I'm like, man, you're doing really good. You must be running a business. So I think that bond that's created, Scott, is something that now and forever you'll always have. I'll always have. Your guys that are out there that are listening, your clients, your customers, and I think that. Some of those things that are those failure points, man, I'll talk all day. I'd end up boring people to death. But when you have to go home and say it's over or this one failed, it's a big step. But it's a big step in growth. I am telling you, I don't know what experience I have or I don't have, Scott, but I will tell you this, that without those failures, without those epic failures, without those moments in time when you're saying to yourself, the money is gone, the opportunity is lost, what do I do now? Those are those true moments where you realize you're being planted for something greater. And it's your decision if you end up to, get up and drive on, create a new plan, and execute.
So let's talk about the failures, because I think when you say failures, it doesn't necessarily mean the business failed.
Right.
It might mean setbacks, like a setback failure, not the business. So maybe talk about a little of failure, setback, because failure, I think sometimes people think, oh, the business was a failure. I lost this and now the business is going to be a failure. I messed up this, so now the business is going to be a failure. It's really not. It's like that was a setback. Mm-hmm. The only time you really fail, one of the best things I ever heard, and I got to credit multiple people to this. Off the top of my head, I would say 𝗙𝗵𝗶, Andy Frisilla, 𝗚𝗏𝗏 Jesse Etzler. The only time you fail is when you quit.
Right.
So if that's the definition of failing, then the rest are setbacks. Yeah. So how does a business owner, an operator, a leader inside a business who owns that passion just as much as the entrepreneur sometimes and for them,
right?
How do they know, okay, this is just a setback, what do I do? How did you handle those?
Yeah. Well, first thing, Scott. First of all, there was a massive setback and failure in my history where I completely crashed a company. We can get into that if you want to, but I always think that before we get into the, it's kind of the what you learn from it, right? And I don't. And man, you can't. The mistake is made. You can't put the bullet back in the gun. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? All right. So fine. What did we learn from this? So we don't do that again. And even some of our own conversations, right? I'll bring up all these things that, I was like, oh, I know what happens when we go around that corner. So I think that in some of these setbacks, I think that sometimes maybe we put too much weight in it. Sometimes we believe it's too heavy for us, and I think everyone has their way of dealing with it. You and I have had multiple conversations that, and I don't hide it, is that, it's our faith. That kind of pulls us through a lot of this stuff. And, I tried to run a business without the love and grace of Christ, and I thought that I was just hard enough to do it, and I failed. I decided to rebuild that with that as my foundation, and I've had massive success. But even in those successes, I think, to the question you have is great. Like, these setbacks are only setbacks that sometimes are turning you toward a greater success. And I know that's easy to say for me now, and for the guys that are out there, the guys and gals that are out there that are crushing it out there every day, and you get these setbacks, you didn't get the contract. The payment terms aren't what you want. It allows you to grow, because now you have to think, you have to pivot. How about this? You and I having multiple conversations when the pandemic hit, right? Everyone had to pivot. And look at those that came out on the other side of this thing. They're stronger, they're bigger, they're more developed. The next thing is going to be easy for them.
Right.
So,
it's funny. You mentioned the power of your faith in Christ and thinking about that, and that just gives you such a foundation. And two different instances I can think of. One, and I can't remember where I heard this first time. I said, Christ closing a door is just as important as him opening a door.
Absolutely.
Because you don't know what's on the other side. You may think you're running the right direction. Getting that door slammed in your face, it feels terrible, but it might be the greatest thing ever. Yes. That's part of where faith comes in. And then something you said to me, even recently in the last probably 2 years, just a bad thing happened. We're dealing with it. We're here. And you're like, well, first of all, just remember, our families are healthy. Our kids are great. Yep. This is not the end of the world. And that framing that in that setting just reminds you, okay, it's really a setback. It's just if you're going to live to the end of the road, to the end of the life, there's going to be good years and bad years. There's going to be good times and bad times, but those things that forge. So I think those are just good perspective to have.
I think it's kind of like, Scott, you and I are one of our things that we're most proud of, right? Be way beyond our businesses, and just under our faith and our relationship with our wives is our kids. And sometimes when we sit down with, with business owners, it's almost like when you're sitting down with your daughters and I'm sitting down with my son or my daughter, and what they think is a massive deal, what they think is like the most epic thing that's ever happened in their lives. You want to look at them hug them and say, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes when we're running businesses and we have so many pressures on us, and we do, it's real. The weight is heavy. It's not fake. I think we think that whatever this next decision is going to make is going to absolutely, completely alter everything that we're going to do going forward. When in all reality, these are things you will literally laugh at in years to come.
Yeah. So someone listening to this obviously will resonate with it. They know that, but they might not say, what's next? Okay, what do I do now? Okay, so that's great. I understand, guys. I feel the same way. What do I do, though? How do I take the fact that, okay, now I know failure is setbacks and not failures? How do I know that this is all hard and not, normal? How do I know that these things are all true and I'm not that bad and I'm not that good? Okay, but what do I do? How do I ultimately get my bio to say I'm successful and I did it and I accomplished it to whatever that is? How do they, where do they take the next steps? Where's the right places for them to focus to be a great operator and take those lessons and move them forward? How do they do what's next?
Yeah. You said it right there. Be a great operator. And being a great operator starts with operations. And being a great operations guy means you have a plan. And I think that so many of us, want to get out there and execute. You want to execute the play, right? And everyone knows that, you and I, both as golfers, all we want to do is go to the driving range and hit driver, hit driver, hit driver, hit driver. When in all reality, we should be working. Well, you and I should probably be working on a lot of other things in our golf game,
Stupid wedge.
Yes, darn sand wedge. But what I think is that sometimes I feel like business owners, especially younger business owners or people that are in those growth modes, they can't see the forest through the trees. They don't take a step back and plan. They want to get out in the car and drive as fast as they can in the car. But wouldn't it be better if we just took a step back, looked everything up on the map, hit the thing on the navigation button, and then have a clear path to where we're going? Mm-hmm. I just feel like everybody feels like they're in a rush. When I sit down with business owners, and this is a great question that you ask, that is exactly what but I gotta go. Todd, I gotta go, man. You don't understand time. Tick, 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 tick. I get that. Mm-hmm. Take a knee, take a breath, drink water, make a plan, make sure that plan is good, and then go out there and execute it.
Yeah, then put the urgency to the plan.
Correct.
And I think that's why a lot of people get very active and they get very busy and they get stressed because they're not necessarily executing on a plan. So then therefore they don't know how to measure it. So the only thing they're measuring is the ultimate outcome, which might take 10 or 12 years. So you're constantly feeling like a failure. Whereas if you build a plan and you're executing the plan, there's going to be steps along that plan. There's going to be little milestones. There's going to be little ways like you're accomplishing what you're supposed to accomplish. But setting up that plan is the part that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, and also I feel like a lot of guys don't get focused. Mm-hmm. I feel like that we're, here, I'll use this analogy. How does Cheesecake Factory do it? I haven't been in a Cheesecake Factory in a long time, but the menu is like this as thick as the Bible itself.
I know.
How do they do that? They make meatloaf and Chinese food.
In one menu.
In one menu.
The kitchen guys must be exhausted.
They hate their job, But it's not, and it comes out, and look at that. It comes out, and it's not really even that good of food. No. Sorry for those that are big fans of the Cheesecake Factory. It's really not good food. It's not good for you either. But what I mean is that pick the things that you're really good at and focus in on that. Your customer needs you at some level. But don't try to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
Some of the most successful businesses that are out there have found their niche. They're really good, just like you. Listen, you're not a factoring company because you're not. And look at the success that you've had here. And look at all the companies that you're actually helping with this program. And you know how proud I am of you. Personally, professionally, as a dad, as a husband, I think the world of you. But one of the things that you did, Scott, you did really well, is you focused on one thing, one area, one niche business. And then I love how you do this, and I would love to see a lot of other owners do it. Don't focus so much on the outcome. Like, seriously, man, stop worrying about, what you're going to do in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Focus on the now. Focus on this quarter. We always propose monthly, quarterly, annually, shutdown, plan, execute. And I feel like sometimes we're so out in front of ourselves for what we want to accomplish for, like you said earlier, that Instagram moment. Yeah. It's really not necessary.
We did it the other way for 6 years, and I did exactly what you said. Just spun, got busy, got active, spun, tried to be everything to everyone, tried to factor, tried to do that, and it just didn't work because you don't get good at anything.
Yeah.
And so then no one knows. And the worst part, what I learned is nobody knows who you are, and if they don't know who you are, people don't like working with strangers.
Sure.
So that was the other problem. So if that one thing alone made all the difference in the world, it's like, okay, well, if people don't want to work with strangers, they want to work with people they know. That means they want to work with people they know, they trust, that are delivering something to them. Well, then you better get tight on something that you're good at because otherwise you can't fulfill that piece. And I was like, that would have been great to know, like the first day I showed up in the business rather than just spinning around. Like, you think you open a website, or the time I told somebody, oh, yeah, I started this company. Like, what'd you do? I went down and filed the paperwork and got the LLC, man, on a bank account. Like, dude, that's not starting a business. That's just like, I don't even know what that is. So that's just the basic setup. But those little nuggets like that, talk to me about moving through the next phase. So, okay, you start to find a little success. You got to graduate out of you're not doing everything anymore. You have one crew, two crews, you have a team, you have not 5 or 6, 7 people, but you have a manager too, or you have superintendents or project managers or whatever the business might be, but there's layers. All of a sudden, where you used to do it all, or used to be more keen to it all, now you have things happening that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
Or now you have things happening that you didn't even know about, or you have initiatives being started, or good and bad. How do you transition to that such that you can now start to scale? And how does that planning phase work? So maybe touch on that quickly too. You mentioned planning in the previous question, but what if someone doesn't know how to plan? And I asked that for myself. I didn't know how to plan. Someone actually just sit down and show me what that looks like. Start with the end in mind, work backwards. But once you have all these people doing these things, how do you communicate that to them? How do you run an effective meeting? Talk maybe a little bit about your thoughts on transitioning from when you do it all, or maybe just you and a partner or 3 people, and all of a sudden now you're trying to operate a business with a goal, with a plan, and execute that. And now you're adding people, and maybe talk about how someone succeeds or not in that section.
Yeah, so I think that if I'm trying to understand what the exact question you're asking is that, I think it's back to a conversation that we had. I walked into my own office and it was the first time, because the growth was starting to, it was like compounding and compounding, compounding. And I always say that, you lose that little bit of personality piece when you start noticing people in the office and you don't know their first name. There was a time and place where, before some of these growth booms, I knew their name, I knew their wives' names, I knew their kids, I knew everything. We used to do these town hall meetings, and I used to, walk through afterwards and have these sincere conversations about, what was going on in their lives. And now we're in these meetings, or we're going and flying to other locations and other offices, and you just completely, you just don't, there's no way to hold on to it, right? The leaders. So back to the questions on how do you develop in that growth, you then have to start to do 2 things, right tool, right job, right? When you're starting to select these people to start managing these different parts of your business, you have to figure out what their strengths are, focus in on those. And remember, not everyone is going to be you. They're not going to act like you all the time, okay? And that's fine. But then harness on those skill sets that they have. And to the question of planning, all right, I'm a huge shutdown guy. I believe everything ends and begins with something referred to as shutdown. It's a George Merck thing. We always talk about all our favorite books, and George Merck, the founder of Merck Pharmaceuticals, did something called shutdown. And he did it in the summer when the factories were shutting down. It was his time to manage with his staff. I always do it around the Christmas time, holidays, most time because I was a federal contractor, and the Fed space kind of sat down in December. It kind of settled down. So it was our time to plan. And so what you do is, or what I would recommend is you start to now, since you can't walk around the office anymore and ask every single person how they're doing and have these touch points with everyone, you have to start to segment out your business and developing those leaders. Your time has to be spent on the individuals that are running these divisions inside your company and no longer running your entire company. And that creates an effect of trust and a lack of control. 2 things that entrepreneurs are not really good at. We don't trust a ton of people, and we don't like having a lack of control. But it is something that you have to develop and grow to. So you better develop the snot out of the guys and gals that are around you, Scott. And you better hope that they can execute back to a plan and help them, guide them in this planning.
When you think about, you mentioned federal contracting and your business, I want to get into the tactical pieces that you had here. So we serve a lot of construction contractors in private segments, also in the government space, federal, state, city, municipalities.
Sure.
We hear a lot of people wanting to get into that space. Talk a little bit about the differences between working private and going after government or federal work. Is there a difference? What are they? How does one succeed? Can you succeed in both?
Yeah, I think you can succeed in both. I think for a lot of your customers, they can succeed in both. I think that when if I had to classify it between my work in the private sector and my work in the, for the federal government, and I also have had experience working with state and local governments as well. I think that the best way to classify it is that, I think that things are a little more regimented in the government. I think that terms and contracts maybe can extend a little bit longer, but I think you have to work a little bit more diligently. I don't want to say harder. I think that, for example, in the Fed space, state and local space, a lot of the work that you'll win revolves around your preparation and execution around a proposal. All right, and then they all ask for, they'll put out an RFP, and you got to respond to the RFP. And it's hard with an entrepreneur sometimes, because usually we're really good on our feet. Really, you get me in front of a client, or you get me in front of the decision maker, I can make them believe that I really am, because, as you know, I believe you can't sell sincerity unless you're sincere. And I always believed in what I was executing on. In the Fed space or the state and local space, you have to somehow put that out on paper. And many times they, want to keep a little bit of a Heisman with you on the, hey, I'd like to come see you. They really don't want to come see you. And a lot of times it has to be down to what's on paper and how you can execute. Now, once you're in there, then you can do your thing. I think that you have to be a little bit more regimented certainly in the federal space and the state and local space. And I think that, more of it is based around the execution to what is in writing to what they want as far as the deliverable at the end of the day. Hope that answered the question.
It does. So when you started in the federal space, what size contracts did you go after?
I first started off as a subcontractor. I can't say what I used to say, but I basically would do anything. Like, if someone came up to me and literally said, like, Schweitzer, I thought you were an IT company. Yeah, absolutely, logistics and drive trucks and, shoot guns and do anything you want me to. I mean, really, we were so, we were struggling so much at that phase. But once I took a breath, once someone, one of my mentors, once Tony got his arms around me and said, hey, listen, you got to slow down. You got to come up with a plan. This is a mess. You're a mess, which I was. I took the knee. I drink water. I moving out and execute, which, by the way, the whole take a knee and drink water is a big military thing. People are probably wondering, like, why does he keep talking about just drinking water? It's when you're running too fast in the military and so someone says, hey bro, hey, take a knee, drink water. It basically means you're spinning out of control. Yeah. So I was spinning out of control. Once I got that, I started to go after contracts where I knew I was good and I had a background. Most of my background, like I always say, it's, in the bio, it talks about special forces and this and that. I was the one with no cool stories, okay? Like I always say, Scott, like if everybody got a G.I. Joe doll, like, and the kid opens it up on Christmas, gee, thanks, Dad. The G.I. Joe Special Forces, 3rd Special Forces Group doll. Oh, the Todd doll. Not only is his name like totally lame, like Todd, what? It doesn't sound hard at all. And I got like a phone and a radio, and they're like, throw it in the corner. That doll sucks.
The little communications doll.
I don't want the communications doll. Doll sucks. But no, I took that background and and that's where I started to focus on, because I realized that, in order for me at that small stage, and I got to tell you, I took that all the way through to we were 1,200 employees, every one of my contracts I could talk to.
So these subcontracts might be 10 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand.
Yeah. Most of them are more, but they take more time. Like there's no quick wins, right? If you want a $2 million contract that's going to execute on the network operations center at the Department of State, it's not going to be one conversation. And that's part of the problem with working in the Fed and the state. And so when I talk to guys and they want to do it, I always have them feather in both commercial work and state and local work, because the state and local work not only takes a long time to win, it also usually takes a long time to get into their payment cycle. It's not odd. I'm working with a business right now, and they have, in some of our contracts, we're like net 90. So you got to have some thick cash in order to get through those 90 days in order to get paid. Now, once you get into the payment cycle, it happens more frequently. Right. Net 30 is more normal, but getting that first through is really hard.
And by the time let's just take 𝗙𝗵𝗶, for example.
Sure.
You started as a subcontractor, a few $100,000 contracts. Ultimately, you ran that business for how long before it was sold to
General Dynamics.
General Dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we started it in 2007. And I was I started as employee one. I had sold a business about a year and a half prior, and I had moved my family from Washington, D.C. to Tampa. And I had a different attitude. One of the things that I had to learn in my first business that is not on the bio, I crashed, okay? And I was trying to sprint the marathon. And in the second business, I learned how to maybe do it a little bit better. Try to calm down a little bit, make a better plan, and I did okay. That exit in 2006, I always say, was a good hit, but I still made a ton of mistakes. So when I came down here, my focus was on prime contracts. I didn't want to sub anymore. I had a little bit of money. I had enough that I could breathe a little bit and start to create this business. And I knew that priming was the way that I wanted to go. Listen, in my path. So I started to build back on former past performances and working in a small sector. So I went back to U.S. Special Operations Command, which I know very well, and I knew in a section that I knew very well, and I did my best to work myself into there, and in all reality, I was a sub at first. Their contract completed. I was one of the subcontractors. I rolled the dice, and when you do that, when you move to the prime, you give up that sub seat. So you're giving up that cash flow when you do that, and you're going to the prime and basically saying, I appreciate it, but now I want to try to take the hill. And we did that, and we were successful. And that was our first contract. It got us up and running. It got us a prime past performance. And from there, we used monies that we were making from another side of the business. That's the one that usually everyone wants to talk about. That's the one with the guns and the ammo and the helicopters and the overseas operations and all the funny stories that everybody always asks me about. But we were able to utilize a business that I was able to have a bunch of cash flow pushed back into a business that needed cash because the run rate to get there, Scott, was so long. That's why a lot of small subs can't get to prime seats.
That's right. So would you say so by the time you got, when you got to the end of that road, what size contracts were you ultimately going after inside that sector?
Yeah, it was all, so the $750 million contracts. I wouldn't bid on anything under $100 million at that point. So from 2007, we had a massive growth spurt. From 09 to 12 was just an absolute sprint. It was almost, and you want to talk about, everyone always wants to say, how did it get there? And I always say this, I get way too many accolades for that success. I was blessed with two amazing business partners. The folks that we had, and it's the thing you should say, but I really mean it. And I'm still close with a lot of these guys. The folks we had were amazing. People bought into what we were trying to do. This is where we came from. SOCOM was where we all grew up. So there was an enormous amount of esprit de corps and pride that went into all of our work. Yeah. But at the end, Scott, the contracts were large. So the last contract we won, a 10-year, $750 million contract. That's a long run rate. Yeah. We worked hard to win that one.
And you worked, but that's my point. The reason I asked that question, you started in early 2000s.
Yeah.
And now 14 years later,
sure,
you're bidding on 10-year, $750 million contracts, which you would never be able to win. And God forbid you even did get it, you'd never be able to execute on it without the previous 13 years and completing the subcontractor, completing the prime, competing with the prime and winning, losing against the prime. You wouldn't know if you didn't have all the other stuff. And that's my point, is it's okay to just take your time and lay out a strategy, work backwards from that. 14 years from now, I want to win a 10-year, $750 million contract. Okay, great. What's step one? Step one is win my first contract. It might be $50,000, and it might be as a subcontractor. And then go. That's okay. Bid. And also, by the way, it means before I start this work, get some good service work going inside the private sector or whatever it is I do. Whether you're in construction or manufacturing or anything else, so that you have some cash flow coming in because these cycles, and then let yourself learn those lessons.
Yeah, no, it's just, I couldn't say it any better,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself inside your business into one sector or another, because when that thing dries up, pivoting when it's over is a really bad move.
Yeah.
And I would tell you this, and you and I have talked about, sometimes how I feel about some of this business coaching that's going around. I feel like it's really expensive, and I feel like some of these, I feel like sometimes maybe young business owners feel like they need to do it or whatever, but finding a mentor is pretty critical. That I've had 2 or 3 in my career that I would never be here without them, ever.
Right.
Not even close, not by a landslide. So I think that if you are fortunate enough to find someone that really does care and their give a shit factor is through the roof for your success, man, you consider yourself lucky, because I was the lucky recipient of 2 of them.
And listen to them.
Man, they have nothing to lose, Scott. They have nothing to lose. Like, they're here to help you. I think that when you're down in the trenches of your business, like I say, you're down in there executing every day. Boom, 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 boom. Man, it is hard. Man, it is hard to lift your head up, away from the day to day and say, we're going there. Like I always say to you, like the catbird seat, like that, that little dude that sits inside the ship, and you're down there on the deck, and there's water coming across the deck, and people are screaming, and and they're like, somebody's got scurvy, I don't know, like,
bad. It's just all bad.
Yeah, at some point we got to hit the United States. You're Christopher Columbus, but you got that little dude that's that's up on top of that thing. Like, boom, boom, yeah. Northwest, now, hard.
You need that guide.
Yeah, that guide is pretty damn important.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap up with one section. There's a lot of misconceptions. I think a lot of people overlook some of the basics of business. And I think there are some of the biggest reasons why people succeed or not. So I want to get your opinion on them. Think of a good business that has a chance to succeed.
Yep.
How good or bad is their accounting practices?
Critical. It's got to be there. The numbers tell the business, right? I always say that, there's a lot of always drama in business, no matter what it is. Guess who doesn't have drama? Excel. She don't lie. She only spits out numbers, right?
That's true.
And it's the accounting practices. I will say to you this: a business owner that doesn't understand his own accounting practices is like being dropped off in a foreign nation and not speaking the language. Sure, you can get around. Sure, you can do okay. But if you don't speak that language, learn it.
You might be able to survive, but you'll never thrive. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. Same question. Now we're talking legal. So think, but not lawsuits, maybe lawsuits. Think people. Think legal around the people, your team, your employees, your contracts. Do you have your contracts reviewed, or you just read them and make some edits yourself? Do you utilize legal services in that way? Like, what does a good business do? What does a business that's up and coming do?
Okay. I love our lawyers out there at times, but I also think that depending on your budget, trust your instincts. Trust your instincts around people. You and I have both talked about this, and it's a big saying. Damn agreement's only as good as the 2 people that are signing it. You can sue me tomorrow, if you want to, for just about anything, for wearing blue shoes, but right now I'm wearing brown ones. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean the lawsuit can't prosper. I think if you're a growing business, I think it's good to have really good counsel, but I think you have to be careful about where that goes in the budget.
Yeah. What about getting your contracts reviewed? So maybe you're a subcontractor. Did you ever use legal services when you were a subcontractor and the prime gave you a contract?
I think sometimes, if it's a relationship like boot to ant, that what it was most of the time for me, I'm looking at the pearly gates of Northrop Grumman as a two-person company, what am I going to redline in that agreement that they're even going to listen to?
Right.
So I think that again, go back to your instinct. Create a relationship inside that organization. Create something in there that someone will listen to. It's if you don't sign it, sometimes you don't get it.
Right.
But overall, if you can, that's great. Many times, if you're working with a really respectable institution, there are only a couple levers that you can really pull that matter to your business.
Yep. And what's the best approach to going about getting bonding? If you need to get bonded, is there any advice you'd give people?
You know, I think that in order to do that, I think I would work with one good institution. That's really what I would do. Create that. Again, it goes back so much of this, Scott, as you know, man, so much of the stuff that we do is based on relationships. Someone's got to want to pick up that phone. And I think that when you're talking about, particularly in bonding, you got to work with an institution that is going to understand your business, understand where you're going, and be able to secure that bond so that you can get that work.
Yeah. All right. 3 quick questions for you.
Go ahead.
This wraps it up.
Yep. Go ahead.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I ever received. Make sure that, whatever you're planning to and whatever you verbalize, you live up to and execute.
Do what you say you're going to do.
And then the second part is for your people. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's real.
That's real. What's your favorite business-related book?
Ooh. Well, I'm going to go with a little bit of a layup here and tell you that the Bible is my favorite business book. But if I had to break away from that, I would tell you to do 2 things. Watch the movie Goodfellas. Every great business lesson in your entire life you can learn from the movie Goodfellas.
There's a lot of truth to that.
And if you had to read a book, I would say Good to Great. I really think there's a ton of stuff in there. So you asked me 1, I'll give you 3. Sorry about that.
I like in that order probably too. Is good.
Yeah, that probably is exactly what I should do. Although I got to tell you, in years past, I leaned more on Goodfellas than I did the Bible. It's probably why I struggle.
And what's the most underrated skill that a person can have?
The ability to communicate. The ability to communicate not just your position, but where you're trying to get to. And also the ability to bite your tongue, listen, read the room. It's kind of like one of those things about the trait that I talk about sometimes when people go to dinner. It's amazing to me how people read the menu, and you're at a business dinner. What does it matter if you have the chicken parm or the steak? You're not there to eat. You're there to focus your attention on them. So I think being able to disconnect from that, turn your shoulders, turn your eyes. This is important time, Scott. You're important to me. Having that skill set and not having the fastest, most wise thing to say next. And damn it, you better be able to read that room, because that room's talking to you.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. I love it. Well, dude, thank you very much.
You.
I appreciate you joining in. I hope this was helpful. I'm sure it was. And for all of you listening, if you would like to find either one of us, you can find Todd on LinkedIn. You can see us on our webpage, mobilizationfunding.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Our YouTube channel, Mobilization YouTube. Go to YouTube at Mobilization Funding. And in the meantime, you all have a great week. I hope you enjoyed this. Share with your friends. God bless you. Take care.